To His Coy Mistress is a Cavalier poem written by the English author and politician Andrew Marvell, 1621 to 1678. Either during or just before the English Interregnum, 1649 to 1660. It was published posthumously in 1681. This poem is considered one of Marvell's finest and is possibly the best recognized Carpe Diem poem in English. What does To His Coy Mistress mean? To His Coy Mistress is a metaphysical poem in which the speaker attempts to persuade his resistant lover that they should have sexual intercourse. He explains that if they had all the time in the world, he would have no problem with their relationship moving this slowly. The speaker in the poem is an older man trying to seduce a younger woman. This sounds a bit creepy today, but in Marvell's time, older would likely have been 30s, and younger perhaps 15 or 16. Outline of the poem. The poem is spoken by a male lover to his female beloved as an attempt to convince her to sleep with him. The speaker argues that the lady's shyness and hesitancy would be acceptable if the two had world enough and time. But because they are finite human beings, he thinks they should take advantage of their sensual embodiment while it lasts. The speaker of the poem starts by addressing a woman who has been slow to respond to his romantic advances. In the first stanza he describes how he would pay court to her if he were to be unencumbered by the constraints of a normal lifespan. He could spend centuries admiring each part of her body, and her resistance to his advances, i.e. coyness, would not discourage him. In the second stanza, he laments how short human life is. Once life is over, the speaker contends, the opportunity to enjoy one another is gone, as no one embraces in death. In the last stanza, the speaker urges the woman to requite his efforts, and argues that in loving one another with passion they will both make the most of the brief time they have to live. To His Coy Mistress is a metaphysical poem in which the speaker attempts to persuade his resistant lover that they should have sexual intercourse. He explains that if they had all the time in the world, he would have no problem with their relationship moving this slowly. However, he goes on to explain, they are mortal, and once they die they will be unable to be intimate together. The poem appears to serve dual purposes: first, to persuade the mistress to love, and second, to comment on mortality in its inevitability and grotesqueness. It is the latter objective which adds the philosophical aspect to this love poem. He tells the lady that her beauty, as well as her long-preserved virginity, will only become food for worms unless she gives herself to him while she lives. Rather than preserve any lofty ideals of chastity and virtue, the speaker affirms, the lovers ought to roll all our strength, and all our sweetness, up into one ball. He is alluding to their physical bodies coming together in the act of love-making. This poem is admired for its metaphysical imagery. Metaphysical poetry was primarily known for the use of extended metaphor and conceit, as well as unlikely comparisons between abstract and worldly ideas. To His Coy Mistress is written in iambic tetrameter, and rhymes in couplets, AA, BB, CC, DD, and so on. It has been recognized as one of his most famous poems. Let's look at the poem. To His Coy Mistress, by Andrew Marvell. Had we but world enough and time, this coyness, lady, were no crime. We would sit down, and think which way to walk, and pass our long love's day. Thou by the Indian Ganges side shouldst rubies find, I by the tide of Humber would complain. I would love you 10 years before the flood, and you should, if you please, refuse till the conversion of the Jews. My vegetable love should grow vaster than empires and more slow. 100 years should go to praise thine eyes, and on thy forehead gaze. 200 to adore each breast, but 30,000 to the rest. An age at least to every part, and the last age should show your heart. For, lady, you deserve this state, nor would I love at lower rate. but at my back I always hear Time's winged chariot hurrying near. And yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. Thy beauty shall no more be found, nor, in thy marble vault, shall sound my echoing song. Then worms shall try that long-preserved virginity, and your quaint honour turn to dust, and into ashes all my lust. The grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace. Now therefore, while the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, and while thy willing soul transpires at every pore with instant fires, now let us sport us while we may. And now, like amorous birds of prey, rather at once our time devour, than languish in his slow-chapped power. Let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness up into one ball, and tear our pleasures with rough strife through the iron gates of life. Thus, though we cannot make our sun stand still, yet we will make him run. Analysis of the poem. Lines 1 to 20. The argument begins with an appeal to the coy mistress based on the idea that if time and space were limitless, they could spend their days in leisure. She by the exotic Ganges River for instance, he by the ebb and flow of the Humber. Sex needn't be a priority in this fantasy world. The speaker's ironic tone even allows for his love of the lady a decade before the Old Testament flood. And she could say no to his advances up to the time when the Jews convert to Christianity. Which would never ever happen, of course. Years he would spend growing his love, like a vegetable grows slowly, rooted and strong, in the earth. And he could bide his time admiring her physical beauty, her eyes, forehead, breasts and other parts. The speaker was more passionate of his emotions. He is clearly in awe of her body and totally wants her heart, but because she refuses to comply he introduces this idea of a timeless, boundless love. Time becomes a metaphor for love but is little more than a limitless resource. Lines 21 to 32. But all of the previous means nothing because the reality is that the clock is ticking louder and louder. Time is flying. And then one day you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run, you missed the starting gun. Don't look over your shoulder. Don't look ahead either because there is a vast desert, eternity. The speaker's tone starts to alter, becoming more serious. The future isn't that bright. Her beauty will be lost in the sands of time. Even worse. When she's dead and buried only the worms will experience what he presently longs for. What a challenging image. He too will perish, consumed by his own passion, nothing but a pile of ash. The last couplet of this section is perhaps the most quoted and puts a seal on the message, let's make love while we're still alive. Lines 33 to 46. The final part of this poem concentrates on the rational summing up of what's gone before. Note the first two words, now therefore, it's as if the speaker is saying, look, I've given you two quite valid reasons for you to succumb, consequently this final effort will make you see sense. And the speaker has clearly thrown out the fantasies and wishes of the previous scenes. Gone are space and time and death, in their place is the all-consuming present. The speaker cannot wait any longer for his postponed fulfillment. The emphasis is on the physical, skin, sport, roll and tear. The language being tinged with aggression and forceful energy. As the lines progress the intensity increases, the passion starts to intensify. And when the images of two birds of prey merge, devouring time, the reader is surely taken beyond mere pleasures of the flesh. End of the poem. Thank you. Thank you.